Welcome. Tonight, you're invited to drift back far back to a world that once was. A world where the streets were not lined with neon, but with cobblestones, slick from rain. A world lit not by lamplight, but by flickering torches and candle wax, slowly pooling, where silence meant suspicion, and justice moved, not in silence, but with the slow, deliberate creak of iron doors. ... Now, let your breath settle. The day is done. Let your mind unwind as we guide you on a calm, quiet journey through time. Tonight, you'll explore the rhythms of life and the strange, shadowed systems of justice in medieval Europe. But this isn't a story about kings or knights, at least. Not yet. Tonight, we begin with someone more ordinary. Someone whose name is not remembered. Perhaps ... it could be you. Imagine yourself as a person accused of a crime in the Middle Ages, not in storybook castles or among the feast-laden halls of nobility, but deep within the heart of a village, or lost in the grim echo of a town square after sundown. How did you get here? What does the world look like from the eyes of a medieval criminal? Close your eyes, slow your thoughts. Let us begin. Imagine this. You wake before dawn, not to the gentle chirping of birds, but to the low groan of rusted hinges echoing in a stone chamber. Your bed is not soft, it is straw, flattened beneath your weight and damp from the cold breath of the prison walls. You are not free, you are a prisoner, awaiting judgment. The air is thick with moisture and silence. The scent of mildew clings to everything. You shift slightly. The iron cuff around your ankle, scraping the stone floor with a sound that reminds you you are not alone. Others are here, behind other doors. And the building breathes like an old creature. Wood groans, water drips. Somewhere, footsteps echo and then vanish. You are accused, not necessarily guilty, but accused. In this age, justice was more spectacle than science. There was no forensic team, no appeals, no lawyers in pressed suits, arguing over evidence. Instead, there were whispers, witnesses, and the ever-watchful eye of the church or the Lord's steward. Perhaps you were caught stealing grain, or accused of poaching a deer. Perhaps a neighbor simply didn't like the way you looked at their wife, or the way your herbs smelled when you boiled them at night. Suspicion alone could be enough. Outside the prison, the rhythms of medieval life continue without concern. The blacksmith's hammer beats like a heartbeat. Vendors call in the distance, their voices softened by distance and stone. Bread is baked, water fetched, firewood stacked. Life, in its own brutal simplicity, moves forward. But here, within the jail, time slows.
Ow.
Your fate is not yours to decide. Soon, you are summoned. A guard, more tired than cruel, opens your cell. No words, only gestures. You rise, your legs stiff, and follow. The trial, if it can be called that, is not held in a courtroom but in a hall. Long wooden benches line the sides. Magistrate, perhaps the local lord or priest, presides. You stand. There is no seat for the accused. Your accusers speak. You are allowed to speak as well, but your words weigh less. Social standing matters. You're known by your class, not your name. And so, your future now hinges not on facts, but reputation, rumor, and hierarchy. If the accusation is grave, more severe methods may be used. Trial by ordeal, for example. Perhaps you are asked to plunge your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone. If your hand blisters well, they all do, but if it heals cleanly in 3 days, you're innocent. Right? The belief was that God would protect the righteous. Or perhaps it is trial by combat, even if you've never held a sword. In some cases, an appointed champion may fight on your behalf, though finding one willing is another matter. And then there is public punishment. Stocks, pillories, lashes, branding. Imagine standing in the town square. Your neck and wrists locked in a wooden frame. Villagers pass, some indifferent, some jeering. Children laugh. A piece of spoiled fruit strikes your cheek and slides down your collar. The hours drag. Your muscles ache. The sun burns. And as night falls, you are returned to your cell. Not because your sentence is over, but because sleep will not come. Not easily. You are left to wonder, will tomorrow bring freedom, or more punishment, or worse? In truth, many who suffered such humiliations were not hardened criminals. They were poor or powerless, or simply in the wrong place when suspicion spread like wildfire. And yet, there is something else here. A rhythm, a strange kind of order. In this harsh world, even cruelty has a schedule. The town sleeps, and justice sleeps with it. Your eyes close. Tomorrow is another day, or perhaps not. As the light fades from the prison walls, let us now drift across the centuries and through candlelit corridors of nobility, into the life of a man once draped in velvet and gold, a man whose tale is both shadowed and silent, rarely told in full whispers anymore. His name was Gilles de Rais. To some, he was once a decorated war hero, companion of Joan of Arc herself, a marshal of France, a nobleman born into great power, with estates sprawling across the countryside and halls filled with tapestries that whispered of wealth, lineage traced back to knights and crusaders. But time does not only lift it, also corrodes. And Gilles, like many of his era, lived in a world where glory and horror often shared the same dining table. Let us begin with his rise. Gilles was born around the year 1405 into a turbulent France fractured by civil war, plagued by English invasion, and haunted by the uncertainties of shifting powers. His family was ancient and wealthy, and yet even from childhood, Gilles's life was tinged with instability. His father died in a bizarre accident, reportedly gored by a wild boar. His mother passed soon after. Gilles and his brother were left in the care of a scheming grandfather, whose ambitions for the boy exceeded mere inheritance. By his teenage years, Gilles was already being paraded around as a marriage prospect and a political pawn. Alliances were formed through forced courtships and contests of fortune. And then came war. The 100 Years' War offered Gilles something different, something more visceral. The battlefield did not care for etiquette or polite negotiation. It was a place of chaos, power, and not least in the beginning, glory. He joined the French army and fought bravely. When the young Joan of Arc emerged, Gilles stood by her side. He witnessed her rise, her fearless entry into battle, and her divine confidence in reclaiming France from foreign hands. Their names were spoken together in courts, in whispers, in prayers, but war is not without scars, and not all of them are visible. When Joan was captured, tried, and burned at the stake, something in Gilles ... dimmed. He retreated to his estates, where the outside world could not reach him, or perhaps where it could not judge. What followed was no longer a tale of honor, a life of isolation and excess at his grand chateau in Machecoul. Gilles began to indulge. He commissioned operas and plays at extravagant cost. He surrounded himself with alchemists, mystics, and astrologers. He sought, it is said, to summon wealth through the occult. He believed he could command spirits, unlock eternal knowledge, and transcend the limitations of earthly power. And then the whispers began. Children disappeared, servants spoke in hushed tones. Strange guests arrived at night and did not return. The castle's torches burned long after the villages below had gone dark. But Gilles was a nobleman untouchable, protected by status and coin. For a time, eventually, the church took notice. Not of the disappearances at first, but of Gilles's involvement in forbidden practices, alchemy, necromancy, the invocation of spirits. His wealth had dwindled, his eccentricities had grown, and his former allies now saw him as a liability. In 1440, a formal investigation was launched. Silence, accusation, and confession. Imagine the setting. A chamber lined with clergy and lords, scrolls piled high, candles dripping wax like slow tears. The accused once, the celebrated Marshal of France now, stripped of title, seated not in judgment, but in submission. Charges were staggering. Heresy, black magic, murder. Dozens of witnesses were called servants, guards, townsfolk. Some claimed to have seen rooms painted red, heard screams echo through the halls, or cleaned suspicious stains from stone floors. Others described elaborate rituals and symbols etched into the walls of hidden chambers. Under threat of torture and, in one of history's murkiest confessions, Isle admitted to many things. His words were calm, detailed, detached, and yet historians remain divided. Was it truth or coercion? Some believe Gilles was guilty of terrible crimes, ritual killings, abuse, satanic ceremonies. Others argue it was a calculated takedown, a convenient way to seize his lands and silence a dangerous mind. We may never know for certain. The trial was not recorded with modern precision, but the outcome was final. Gil was sentenced to death. A quiet end to a loud life on the morning of October 26, 1440, Gil was led to the gallows. He was dressed in white, a symbol of repentance. He asked for forgiveness, spoke calmly, and prayed. As the executioner prepared the pyre, Gil reportedly comforted two of his fellow accused, placing his hand gently upon their shoulders, then ... followed. But this is not a tale of spectacle. It is not one of flames or screams. It is one of silence, of a life once loud, fading into stillness. A nobleman whose tale would echo for centuries, not in poems or songs, but in rumors, in unearthed parchments, in dusty court records, stored deep within monastery vaults. Even now, scholars debate, was Giola a monster hiding behind a curtain of velvet, or a victim of political greed, crushed by superstition and ambition? You needn't decide tonight. What matters now is the stillness that followed. The curtain falling on a life shaped by war, molded by power, and finally, consumed by its own weight. Let us move now into a smaller space. Not a prison, not a courtroom. A single room, a quiet chamber tucked in the upper level of a stone manor or monastery. There is a small window, its glass imperfect, letting in a thin stream of soft morning light. Here, sitting by a wooden desk, worn smooth with use, a figure bends over an open book. The book is small and lies slightly larger than your hand. Its pages shimmer with gold leaf. Its letters are delicate, almost embroidered with ink. Each stroke carefully pulled from a feather's edge. Beside the book lies a tiny pot of paint. Saffron yellow, lapis blue. A few flakes of crushed malachite. You're watching the creation, or perhaps the reading of a book of ours. And though it seems simple, unassuming even, this was once one of the most powerful objects in medieval Europe. Not because it commanded armies or changed the laws of kings, but because it shaped the private, silent rituals of daily life. Imagine, for a moment, a time before clocks, a world not yet ruled by hours on a screen or the exacting beep of a digital alarm. In the Middle Ages, time was measured not in seconds, but in seasons, in shadows on stone, the ringing of bells from distant church towers, carried faintly on the wind. For the devout, especially the literate elite or middle-class, time was marked by prayer, and the Book of Hours was their companion. It was a devotional book, often personalized, exquisitely crafted, guiding its owner through daily prayers at 8 canonical hours. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. These were not just times of day, they were rhythms of existence. You might rise with the sun to whisper matins. Pause your midday tasks for sext. Say your final words of the day under candlelight, before compline sent you to sleep. The Book of Hours was often the only book a person owned. It contained not just scripture, but calendars, psalms, litanies, and even marginal notes on weather, planting cycles, or family births. They were deeply personal, and sometimes quietly magical. The margins of these books, especially in the late medieval period, became spaces of imagination and, at times, mystery. There you might see a strange creature, a hybrid of man and beast. A rabbit jousting with a snail, a monk being chased by a giant fish. At first glance, these seem comical. Nonsense. But look closer. Some scholars believe these marginalia were not purely whimsical. They may have held coded meanings, political satire, spiritual commentary, or personal fears. Others point to protective symbolism. A blue hare beside a saint's prayer, a chained dragon in the corner of the page. These were more than decoration, they were safeguards. To carry a Book of Hours was to carry a shield. Not just from sin, but from the dangers of an unpredictable world. Plague, betrayal, childbirth, famine, and in some cases, curses. Yes, hidden curses. Owners inscribed protective invocations within their books, either to deter thieves or to call down misfortune upon those who might misuse it. One Flemish manuscript contains a single line scratched faintly in Latin. "If you take me, and I am not yours, may your hands rot where they touch me." It was quiet, discreet, almost invisible in the page's corner, but it was there nonetheless. To hold a Book of Hours was to gaze into the self. Unlike communal church services, these books encouraged solitude, quiet reflection. The pages turned slowly, and the words were often whispered aloud, not for performance, but for rhythm, for focus. In a time when books were rare and life was loud with hardship, these tiny volumes became islands of calm. Sometimes they were passed down, a mother to her daughter, a monk to his apprentice, a noblewoman to her young son, before a marriage alliance tore her from home. They bore fingerprints, smudges, tears. They absorbed grief and longing. Imagine such a book in your lap now, its cover cracked from age, its pages heavy, delicate. You trace the script, unfamiliar but calming. You don't need to read the Latin. You only need to feel its presence, the hush it brings, the way the outside world seems to still, just for a moment. Many books of ours survive today, but most are anonymous, their makers and readers long forgotten. Some rest behind glass in museums. Others are tucked into archives, their secrets still hidden in faded ink and worn leather. There are scholars who spend lifetimes decoding them, studying handwriting, pigment choice, even the grain of the parchment to learn who might have owned them and why. But much remains unknown. What did the owner fear? What did they love? What lullaby did they hum when the world felt too heavy? These books cannot answer, but they do invite us to wonder. And in that wondering, there is peace. Let us now return to light, to warmth, to a world padded with thick carpets and heavy curtains. The air smells not of mildew and stone, but of beeswax polish, lavender, sachets, and pressed rose petals stored in wooden chests. The hour is just after dawn, and you are not a prisoner, not a monk, or not a peasant in the fields. This time, you are a noble lady in a well-appointed manor. Nestled within the hills of the English countryside, or along the fertile Loire Valley in France, you wake not to the cry of the town watch or the sound of cattle, but to a chambermaid quietly entering your room with a basin of warmed water. Your bed is raised and curtained a private cocoon of linen and soft fur throws. You sit up slowly. The morning air is cool against your skin. Even the act of dressing is an elaborate affair, not hurried, not functional, but ceremonial. Your chemise is pulled over your head. Layers follow silk stockings, a finely embroidered kirtle, laces tightened with care. A girdle perhaps adorned with tiny bells or scent-filled pouches. Finally, the outer gown, heavy, stiff with brocade, its hem embroidered with golden thread and lined with rabbit fur. Your hair is brushed, braided, wrapped, and covered with a crespine or a delicate veil. Every fold, every thread, is part of the unspoken language of class. A lady's appearance was not merely vanity, it was her armor.
Act her signal.
A way to reflect not just wealth, but virtue, discipline, piety. Outside your chamber, the manor stirs with soft noises. Kitschy servants begin the day's work. Steward reads the day's accounts aloud in another room. Somewhere dogs bark in the courtyard, eager for the hunt. The first meal of the day is mowed of small slices of cheese, dark bread, and spiced wine, or watered ale. You do not eat alone. Ladies in waiting accompany you. A clerk reads from a religious text while you dine, his voice low and even. After breakfast comes your time of supervision. You manage the estate's linen stocks, direct household tasks, perhaps oversee the preparation of medicinal herbs for the apothecary chest. The day may include overseeing embroidery, writing letters by candlelight, or examining the latest arrivals of dyed cloth and spices from traders. Your husband, if present, likely handles legal affairs or travels to court. But within these walls, your authority is quietly recognized. You are the rhythm keeper of the household. You may be expected to entertain guests, or, on certain days, to perform acts of charity, sending food to the village poor, assisting with childbirths, or providing counsel to younger women in your care. By midday, light spills across the tapestries of your hall. You walk slowly through the manor, garden careful to avoid direct sun, lest it darken your skin and threaten your delicate appearance. You may read from a psalter or book of ours, practice lute playing, or even study Latin and scripture if your family allows it. Education is a privilege and one still reserved for the few. Some days bring tournaments. You watch from the stands, wrapped in velvet, offering a favor, perhaps a ribbon to a chosen knight. This, too, is performance, an echo of the chivalric ideal. All roles must be played, and played well. But make no mistake, beneath the silken ceremony, your life is narrowly watched. Marriage alliances were strategic, your value calculated in dowries, titles, and children. Love was a bonus heir, unpredictable and often unwelcome. A misplaced smile, an overly familiar exchange, a letter found out of place. These could all shatter the illusion of virtue that holds your life together, and still you smile, you glide. You whisper prayers behind lace fans. As dusk settles, candles are lit. The hall glows gold. Supper is served, game roasted in spiced sauces, fruits soaked in honey, trenchers of fine bread, and almond milk poured into glass goblets. Musicians play quietly in the corner. A harp, a flute. You dine in long stretches, each course served slowly. Conversation is measured. You speak of estates, family news, alliances, and court gossip, always veiled. And when the meal ends, you withdraw again. Perhaps to your soul or a small private room lined with books and needlework. You unlace your gown. A maid helps remove your jewelry. The fire crackles. You take one last look out the narrow window. The moon is rising. The world is still. It's easy to believe at first that this life is easy, comfortable. But even among the elite, there is weight. Childbirth is dangerous. Alliances are fragile. Reputation is currency, and it must be protected without rest. You are not free to choose your path, but you are expected to walk it flawlessly. Even your smiles are rehearsed. Even your sleep is not truly your own. But tonight you rest. The fire dims. The night deepens. Silence returns. You lie in your curtained bed, eyes closed, your breathing slow and steady. Outside, an owl calls softly from the orchard trees. And as sleep comes to you, you are not a noblewoman, nor a prisoner, nor a scribe with ink-stained fingers. You are simply someone, drifting quietly through the centuries. And now, dear listener, our journey through the shadows and silks of medieval justice draws to a close. You've walked the damp corridors of a village jail. You've stood silently in the cold echo of a medieval trial. You've turned the gilded pages of a forgotten devotional. And you've reclined beneath the embroidered canopy of a noblewoman's bed. In all of it, every harsh rhythm and velvet sigh was part of a world that once was. A world that feels distant, but not gone. Its echoes are still here, tucked between stones in old cities, or lingering in folktales murmured across generations. But tonight, you are here. The modern world hums gently beyond your window. The air is still. The rhythm of your breath matches the slow heartbeat of sleep. You are safe, you are warm. And as history folds itself into quiet corners, your eyes may close. Your mind may wander, and the stories will wait, patiently, for another night.